whatever that he read. And so I think it really did resolve a lot of whatever conflicts there were, and you know, he came to trust that he could talk about this and that people weren't going to, you know, look down on him or whatever it was that he might have feared. Anybody have any other questions, or is this making sense to you, or does it seem like it could apply to whatever you might be writing? Okay, yes.
I was just wondering, now this has just happened to me recently. I have for many years had kind of a mad on all the people who are in prison right now, who are innocent, and are maybe some of them are victims of this Mr. Big. What do you know, I just met a woman who was friends with another woman who was in prison and is part of a Mr. Big operation. And I'm wondering if people, like, this is going to take years to get her out of there. Would anybody be interested in that kind of thing? We're just a bunch of ordinary people. We're eventually going to hire a lawyer. And what it takes to get people out of prison, and some of them, there's something coming up, I think on Friday, Passionate Eye or the whatever, about a man who spent, still in prison, 31 years after.
Well, there's an organization, you know,
It's called the Innocence Project, and there's also, and that, but it's going to take us years, gosh, by the time I'm the one that's going to write about it, because I'm the one with the background in writing. This would be of interest to people.
Yeah, you know, you probably get interest in it from two sides, right? Like there would be people who would be sympathetic to you and other people who wouldn't be. So you need to...
Well, they'd be sympathetic if it found out that, like the Mr. Big operation, and it often happens. In fact, within the next few weeks, there's going to be something, I think it's on the Fifth Estate, about when the police get you alone. You'll admit to murdering your mother, even though she's still alive, because that's what they've just made up their mind to do. Now, I'm not saying that happens all the time, but that grilling of the police grilling of people can be extremely, extremely.
Yeah, there's been several films about that, and I think there's probably books, and there are, you know, like people who have gone through those experiences, and I know there's one in North Vancouver who was looking for someone to write his story, but you know, there's still going to be people who are not going to be sympathetic, you know, to that. You know, some will be, but some won't. So I think you need to prepare yourself for that.
Oh yeah.
You know, because it would be a very controversial kind of thing. But not to say it shouldn't be done, but you just need to prepare yourself. And that's one of the things, you know, this other book that I published, Come Back Judy Baba, and that's actually something that Ivan Coyote talks about. Like do people know who Ivan Coyote is?
What was the name again?
Ivan Coyote. She's a young woman, and she was born in Whitehorse, and she's gay and started writing like stories, and she was bullied a lot, especially some of her earlier stuff is based on some of her experience. And people, I took a workshop with her, and people were asking her about writing, and you know, she was bullied, right? And how do you, or you know, something bad had happened to her, which you know, is the kind of thing that you're thinking of. And like she said, you know, you really have to think about why you're writing this. You know, like, is it because you know, to get back at other people for revenge, or to show you're smarter than they are, or whatever it is, or if there's a real victim mentality, you know, like all these things happen to me, and I didn't do anything, and you know, things, I was going to say, Come Back Judy Baba. This is the story of a woman who went to India in 1947 from East Vancouver. She met this guy, and he had lived in India for much of his life. He was British. He was actually in the British military too in the Second World War. And after the war, and that's the year when India became independent, he was actually asked to go back to the work in this carpet factory, like as a manager. So he went back, and then he invited this woman that he met in Vancouver to come back. And so she writes this story, and it's really interesting, you know, all of her experiences and really kind of the colonial attitudes that she had, you know, like what's it going to be like there. Like people don't know. I mean, she was often afraid of things. She was afraid of the snakes and all kinds of things. And then the second part of the book is her daughter's story. Her daughter actually developed polio in India, and she the family ended up moving back to Vancouver. And so when Judy wrote her part, the daughter, you know, here's this story, and her mother was actually really this adventurous person and really quite a good writer, and it's, you know, kind of funny and really evocative and stuff like that. And they had to come back to Vancouver. And then when Judy started writing her story, you know, she was saying, oh, you know, my mother, you know, wasn't a nice person because she wouldn't let me wear nylons when I was 12, you know, and she's like within a couple of months of me in age, you know, and I was saying, you know, Judy, like you can't write that, you know, that you're still angry about your mother not letting you wear nylons when, you know, like 50 years ago, like that's going to make you look bad. That's not going to make people think, oh, after reading this whole story about this woman and all the things she did going to India, and she didn't let her daughters wear nylons when they were 12 in 1962. I said, listen, my mother didn't let me wear nylons when I was 12 either. I mean, that's what happened, and you know what I mean?
Were you like editing her book, or
yes.
Because usually when an editor gets a hold of it, they can look, realize what you've just said.
Well, the editor, we actually had hired an editor, and it was someone that Judy knew quite well, and it was an editor who had edited all of, you know, some quite famous books, you know, who was really like, and Judy had wanted her, and she was like, Judy, you can't write that. You realize how sympathetic people are going to be to your mother. I mean, you know, we both had the same reaction, so she really toned it down, and I hope sort of got over, like, you know, it's time to forgive your mother after 50 years, you know, I mean, like, you're just doing, you know what I mean?
Let go of yourself.
But, you know what I mean? But people do that. You'd be surprised how many people will do that, you know, hold on to things, and that's what they want to do when they write these books. So, you know, it's not going to be revenge. It's not going to get back at the mother. But that's a part of it. For Judy, it was really, I think, a learning experience too, where people actually said to her, you know, get a grip, you know, because...
But contrary to that, that can be a snapshot of the time.
Well, exactly.
So people will realize that, like nylons, when they just came out, that was the biggest gift they could get after the war.
Yes, yeah.
Or,
Yes.
when I was, in my time, girls, if they had long stockings, they couldn't be blue or red, they could be green.
Yeah.
And all that type of thing, so it gives you different periods of life.
That's right, yeah, you have to put it, that's one of the things, and that's one of the things we did with this and with George's, you have to put it in the context of the time and what, well, that was actually one of the things I said to George around the education. You know, he was really embarrassed that, you know, he had dropped out of school when he was 14, and I you know, studied education, adult education at university. And I said to him, well, you know, George, you know, most men in Canada didn't have, that was about the typical kind of education, and really it was after the war when education, or you know, university education or technical training was more broadly available, because it wasn't. That was just, that was the norm at that time, and so putting it in the context, well, it's not me, it's, yeah, exactly, that's what was happening then, and then it did change, and he said, yeah, you know, that he heard afterwards that he could have had more training when he did return, and he didn't know it at the time. He actually wanted to be a draftsman or an architect, and you know, he ended up designing and building, I think it was 3 houses in his life, and so he did that as a sideline, but he would have wanted to do that as a career, and didn't know about the opportunities. So anyway, writing memoir is really a popular thing, and it's also, as people age too, it is a way of making sense of your life. So I think people are getting, I guess we're winding up here, so unless there's any more questions or comments.
Margaret, so would you say a memoir then it's not so much, you said it's autobiography is from birth to death.
Yeah.
The memoir is either about a series of events or experiences within your lifetime.
Yeah, see, his is the perfect memoir because it starts when he goes off to war and ends when he comes back, with what
It
happens.
has a beginning and an end.
Yeah, well, it's about a different thing. This is about the woman's experience in India, not the rest of her life. You know,
Yes.
like,
Yeah, but it also has a beginning and end too. It's just
Yeah, yeah.
capturing that.
yeah, and then, or it could be like certain theme, you know, like
Yeah.
music in my life, you know,
Yes,
like
right.
Keith Richards, you know, his memoir, life, most of it's, you know, about the music and.
Okay. Do you think it makes a difference, the quality of, when someone gets to the point where they're writing their story down or they're telling it to someone, do you think the story is more vivid and fuller if they haven't spent a lot of time telling bits and pieces of it throughout their life?
Yeah, probably, I imagine so, you know. I think what you need to do is more of it.
Yeah, just
But when
wondering
you lose something.
if someone has already sort of told, say for instance, if George had been speaking throughout his life to various people, like sitting down at a coffee shop and telling someone about, you know, oh, this happened to me when I was in the war or whatever. Do you find, I find for myself that
It
if
can
I,
dilute it, you
it's
already
like
got it
the-
out there in some
yeah,
way.
so it doesn't have the same
Yeah,
force.
that can happen.
Diminishes the original.
Yeah.
Watered down over time, sort of
Yeah.
thing.